Hi, everybody. This is JT from the CC and JT Amateur Hour. Over there, somewhere to one side, is CC. And we're welcoming Lynda Bailey today to our podcast. This particular podcast is a joint venture between Two More Books LLC and our friends at the Sierra Arts Foundation, specifically the Sierra Arts Literary Community. What we're doing here is our partnership is trying to lift up and elevate, which is redundant, and highlight writers through Northern Nevada, a very talented group of artists who readers and the general public should get to know better. So we developed this podcast at Sierra Arts Foundation and Two More Books LLC, to highlight a specific writer every week. And Lynda Bailey joins us. And hi, Lynda. We're so very, very happy to have you on board. And I have to tell you, and I'll be blunt right up front, you are our first spicy writer, which is fine because we need all sorts of literary genres out there. And so it's all equally good. They all serve an entertainment purpose. So it's really fabulous, I guess, to have you on board. So please introduce Lynda Bailey to the world via this podcast.
Well, thank you so much, JT. I appreciate the invitation to come and join you and CC. Yes, I am a spicy romance author, better known as erotic romance. I've been in love with romance for all of my adult life, and I've been a storyteller my entire life. So it seemed like a good mesh between the two.
And I was looking through your catalog, and I'm just going to rattle off some titles here. The Shattered Trust series, Fulfilled, Battle Tested Love, Group Therapy, and the book that you brought with us to you today. Which one was that one again, please?
That is Heartache and Hopeful. It is 4 novellas in one book. I wrote the novellas independently, and then I put them together in an anthology. And the basis of the stories are, all the stories take place at an intersection in a fictional town in Nebraska, small rural town in Nebraska. So each story takes place on each of the separate corners of the intersection of Heartache and Hopeful.
Well, we have a little bit of tie here because right after Liz and I Cece and I, hello you, C and I got married, we were stationed in
Whichever
Nebraska.
personality.
So we understand the draw of the Cornhusker state, especially in a literary way. So we have our appreciation. Are you from Nebraska?
No, I was born and raised in Iowa.
Right across the river.
Right across the river. And all of my stories, the majority of my stories, I can't say all, but the majority of my stories take place in small towns. Mm-hmm. And so my tag is ordinary characters, extraordinary romances. So small towns are what I know, and that's what I always gravitate to as far as the settings for my stories.
And I can understand that because in small towns, you know everybody's parents, you know everybody's grandparents, and you know everything about everybody's parents, grandparents, and each other. Is that part of the draw of drawing, writing in small towns?
I think the draw is that it's simply what I know. The omnipotent they say you're supposed to write what you know, and I know small towns. And where you've got, a handful of streetlights, and the draw is, it's just what I know. Like the idea of a small town where you don't necessarily have to lock your doors at night, but you can get your flashy, not just necessarily romances, but you get your flashy stories, big city, New York, Los Angeles, you get your military people doing this, that, and the other thing, going all to Paris and to London and Moscow and doing all of those exotic things. This is just regular people. I write about regular people, bartenders, mechanics, small business owners, things along those lines, because like I say, that's what I know. And I like giving voice to the characters that sometimes we don't necessarily pay that much attention to.
So what about the romance genre? It's, as you said, we could talk about the spicy side, but I was more interested, I don't want to say more interested, but I was more drawn to the romance side, as you use the acronym, which is very common in our industry, HEA, happily ever after. So what draws you to the romantic happily ever after?
Because I like happily ever after.
Yeah.
I like it when the good guys win. I
Mm.
like it when the guy gets the girl, or the guy gets the guy, or the girl gets the girl. I like it when they ride off into the sunset and they live happily ever after. That is a huge draw for me. When I said that I've been a storyteller my entire life, it's true, because when I was a child and watching the westerns on TV, watching Bonanza, watching Gunsmoke, watching some of the other shows that were on TV, like Mod Squad and Starsky and Hutch. I mean, my God, I'm dating myself here. I would always, not always, but I oftentimes would put myself to sleep at night thinking up scenarios where I was in the show, right? And I never died. It was never a love story. No one ever died. And I would stay awake trying to figure out how I could make everything work. And so it's been something I've been doing my entire life.
Well, you've got a sister from another mother in this
Mhm.
podcast because that is exactly what I've been listening to for 40 something years in the way of story development. Cece, you've got to jump in here because she's speaking your language.
Yes, I did the exact same thing. I grew up in the Central Valley of California, and I always walked to school. We had a lot of what they called tule fog, the really dense fog where you really couldn't see very far around you. So I would rewrite the endings of TV shows in my head as I was walking back and forth to school. So yes, we could be sisters in that way. And I actually almost got published at one point writing it was a TV tie-in to the series Quantum Leap. Very close to getting published on that, and then they ended the book series. But those things happen. And I love also the happily ever aspect of it.
Right, right.
You're speaking my language.
Well, that is so sweet. Actually, the very first story I wrote as an adult, soon to be 36-year-old son, was just a toddler. And my husband was traveling a lot for work at the time. And Deep Space Nine, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, was one of our favorite shows. And I wrote an episode called Across the River of Blood, where I featured the Klingon High Council dude Gowron and
Hmm.
Worf, and it took place on this space station, Deep Space Nine. And my husband comes home, and I worked on this the entire time he was gone. Put the kid to bed, and then I was just sitting and typing on the computer. And so my husband comes home from work, and it took me a couple of days to get the courage to ask him to read it. And I says, I wrote this. I want you to read it, but you got to be nice because it's my first time. Don't be mean, right? And he was super impressed, And I'm also a theater major,
Mm.
so technical theater, and so I read a lot of stage plays when I
Hmm.
was in college. So I wrote it as a stage play, the way that stage plays were written, not necessarily screenplays, because
Hmm.
that's a whole nother animal. But yeah, and so my husband was quite impressed with my literary endeavors. And I was kind of off to the races at that point. So,
And again, we are intersecting here a little bit because in my case, I wrote an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation.
okay, tell me the premise.
It was a situation with the captain, Captain Picard, and the I don't remember completely what happened. I still have the script that I wrote
So do
somewhere,
I.
and I actually did try to submit mine and had the like the Paramount stamp on it and everything. So I don't remember specifically. It was shoot. Yeah, it
We
was
should
it
we
was
should
probably
swap.
40 years ago.
Yeah, we should swap. We should swap
That
stories.
would be fun.
It would be
And
fun.
and it should be said, she sent a script in and everything for them. So you got it wasn't Universal, no, it was
No, it was
Paramount.
Paramount.
You got the
Hmm.
Paramount letterhead back and everything like that. And this was just before they closed the door on fan
Right.
submitted scripts. So, it was something that somebody had to actually open instead of just put
Hmm.
it in the
They
envelope.
stamped it.
Right.
No,
Right.
it was funny because at that point I got a letter back saying, "Okay, you cannot send any more of these without an agent."
Wow.
Yeah, I
Why
was
didn't
right
they
on the
why
edge.
didn't they why didn't they help you get an agent? Why didn't they help you, take that final step, right?
That would have been awesome, but it doesn't happen.
Yeah,
So
right.
it's just a general statement here, just to folks who who are watching this and just wondering about how to start the writing gig, is find your passion. Find your
Hmm.
passion, then write your passion, and it may never see the light of the world, but and forgive something that the three of us all know. But what it does do is it gives you the tools. You learn the tools that you need to know in order to become a better writer. You start building your toolbox, your grammar and your structures and things like that. Again, if you're gonna want to get into the writing biz, and think twice about doing that, folks. But once you do if you're gonna do that, start with something that you're passionate about, and then from there you can learn the tools, and then you can expand beyond your passions into what hopefully is a money making enterprise. But that's not always
True.
guaranteed either. Anyway, that's our 2 cents worth for the day.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I have to say, I was so impressed by your website. I was so impressed by your covers,
Hmm.
but I was so impressed by your very well developed and very well structured website, including something I think I'm going to steal when we do our big website redesign probably 20 years from now. But it's the frequently asked questions. And so,
Hmm.
and very thoughtful answers. Of course, the challenge is when you're setting up for an interview and somebody's already answered the questions that you usually ask, it puts the challenge on us that we have to come up with something different. So I'm going to
Yes.
go ahead and I'm going to give you a different question, give you a spitball here. And
Okay.
then I'm going to give you a little bit harder question. But the first question I would ask is that what genre would you absolutely not write in? And I, and that's probably an interesting question because you've already said you've written in science fiction, you've written in romance, you've written in spicy. So what genre would you not write in?
Probably horror.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Well, no, that's not true. That's not true. No, no, can't say that. That's a tough one, JT. Yeah, that's a stumper. I I have written horror. I've written short story horrors back when I was, taking a community college class. So I have written horror. Some
Hmm.
people think Alice Through the Lichen Glass, which is my new adult speculative fiction, um, is has got what's the word I'm looking for? It's the flavoring of horror. There's a
Hmm.
lot of murder, death, kill in there, and but as far as what genre I absolutely would not write, I can't say psychological thriller. I don't know. I'm trying to think, and I can't come up with anything. I don't think I could ever do like a Stephen King kind of
Hmm.
horror. I don't think I could do like a Shining, but don't know the depth of your writing capacity, because I never thought I could write a romantic suspense, and I did. And I didn't think I could ever write a speculative fiction, and I did. So never say never,
Never said it.
right? Never
Hmm.
say never. You can say, I don't think I will, but that's not saying never. When you
Right.
say never, that comes back to bite you, you know?
Very true.
You know? Okay, so that's the hard one. What's the easy one?
What do you think is the biggest misconception about romance writers, especially those who write in the hot to sizzling genre? Hot to sizzling being your description. What do you think is the biggest misconception?
The biggest misconception of romance in general is that it's not worth reading. Romance has a very bad name in the quote unquote academic
Hmm.
crowd.
Hmm.
This is women writing stories for women. Well, that just can't be, right? That's just not okay. That can't be good writing. That can't be good storytelling. And it is.
Hmm.
And so for romance in general, I tell people I'm a romance author. I used to kind of go, yeah, I write romance.
Hmm.
A little bit like that. And now it's like I'm loud and proud. Right. I write romance. Anybody's got a problem with that. And I get the digs. Oh, you write porn. Oh, you're nothing, you just write a bunch of slut. No, 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 no. That stuff. That's the other misconception. I write erotic romance. I do not write erotica. And there is a difference. You know, my stories have a plot, they've got a character arc, They've got a plot arc, they've got conflict, they've got emotions, they've got, it's everything you want in a story. It just is about two people, or sometimes more than two people, who fall in love and want to make a life together. There's nothing
Hmm.
wrong with that. And so, writing erotic romance, the way I preface it, and I'm not sure this was on my website or not, JT, but a romance itself is like cake, right? Cake is good, it's yummy, it's moist, it's delicious, but the erotic part of it is like the icing, right?
Hmm.
And it doesn't take away from the cake. It doesn't mean that the cake isn't still great. The cake is still great. It's just that it's a little bit better with that icing, right? And so the
Hmm.
erotic aspects that I write is like the icing on the cake. You don't need it, but sometimes it's just nice to have, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Spice of, or icing of life, I guess, is more.
Yeah, icing, right?
Icing is the
And
spice of life.
exactly. And the person I do events with, her name is Elise Mannion. She writes clean romance. So all of the love scenes are behind a closed door. Mine is obviously wide open. And so Elise came up with the idea of doing naughty and nice.
Hmm.
Reno romance authors, naughty and nice. I'm the naughty part. She's the nice part. And so, and we get a lot of people coming into the booth, and a lot of them gravitate to my spicy table, but then a lot of them gravitate to hers
Hmm.
because some people are just not comfortable, and that's okay. It's not for everybody, right? It's just like, Stephen King horror isn't for everybody. My I
Right.
have a I have a great niece. She loves Stephen King. Just gobbles up his stuff like Tic Tacs. She's into horror, you know.
Hmm.
Cool. It's just not what I enjoy reading. I don't like being scared when I read.
Right.
I don't like that. That nah. Mama don't like being scared.
I agree.
I got my question, Cece. Did you want to drop any in here?
Actually, I do have one because I don't personally write spicy. I did try it a little bit, but it just doesn't come out that way. I don't think it's my personality. But in reading, I know that there are some words that are used by a variety of maybe erotic authors or authors of erotic romance that people find very cringy. How do you balance choosing the right words for those intimate scenes?
It kind of depends on the premise of the stories.
Hmm.
Okay, I have one. It's technically a novella, although it's like almost 50,000 words, so it's not really a novella, but it's not really a novel length either. And it's called Erotic Escapades of a Married Couple. And this is a polygamous relationship where you have a husband and wife and they bring another gentleman into the relationship. Okay, pretty much no holds barred,
Hmm.
because if somebody is going to click on that link and they've read the description, they know it's a polyamorous relationship, they're going to get it. They're going to get it
Hmm.
full blown in the face, right? And then when it came to Alice Through the Lichen Glass, which was my new adult speculative fiction, I seriously dialed that down.
Hmm.
There was still open door love scenes, but the verbiage was way cut back, was
Hmm.
way muted. And it just really it depends on the premise of my story. It depends on the characters. And if I've got a sassy heroine who's like, "Yeah, show me what you got." Well, the verbiage is probably going to be a little bit more on the vulgar side. And
Right.
I put the warnings in the beginning of all of my books. This is for mature readers. Don't let your 13-year-old get a hold of this book, kind of situation. And yeah, there are times when I've been reading a book and I'm like, it's not so much that the verbiage is cringy for me, but they just prolong it unnecessarily.
Hmm.
Especially because I do also write BDSM romance, bondage, domination, sadism, masochism, and I'm not in the lifestyle, but I have a friend who is, and so she's my kink coach, and so I go to her when I'm doing that type of a story, and she's really great about giving me the P's and Q's and saying, this would not happen, but this would, and on like that. But it depends on the story.
Mm-hmm.
It really depends on the story. It depends on the premise. I
And I,
hope that answers.
and I love that phrase you just used, kink coach. I think
Yeah, I'm
that's
a kink coach.
that's just fascinating. Just about that, you could probably write a book about writing a book and discussions that you have with your kink coach. It would
Right.
almost be a comedy, wouldn't it?
Yeah, there's a lot of books out there about for authors about the BDSM lifestyle. And 50 Shades of Grey did a lot for the lifestyle, but it also did damage
Mm-hmm.
because this is not the premise within that trilogy or whatever it turned out to be is not normal, is not what you get.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and you don't, you see the memes on Facebook. If the dude lived in a trailer park, they'd be calling it abuse,
Mm-hmm.
not romance, right? But he's super rich and he's super this and he's super that, so he can quote unquote get away with it, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
right?
I do think it is good to talk to somebody, if you're writing maybe characters that are not within your culture or something. Usually you
Exactly.
get a sensitivity coach who will give you the inside scoop on whether something's going to be offensive to that culture. So whatever you're writing, it's always good to have someone who's more familiar with it.
Who's the expert, right? And I agree with that totally, CC. A book that it's kind of floating around inside my cranium is a regency centered around horse racing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know nothing about horse racing, but I reached out to a gal who knows a lot about horse racing, and she recommended a couple of fiction books for me to read, which I have. And so you've got to bring in the experts. You cannot, don't Google everything because
No.
Google sometimes doesn't get it right. I took boxing for a number of years. And so in Heartache and Hopeful, there's a boxer. And
Mm-hmm.
and I've got a few scenes with boxing and this and anything. And so I didn't need to find an expert in boxing because I kind of know what I'm talking about when it comes to that. But I don't know anything about horses, and so I need expert opinions, you
Mm-hmm.
know, for those types of aspects to my stories.
This has been incredibly fascinating, especially hearing the technical aspects of writing spicy novels, which I don't think a lot of people think that it can get complex. Because it can get complex. You've proven that here. Lynda, here's your opportunity, last opportunity to sell yourself. Where can we find you on the internet? What's your website? What's your social media?
I am on Facebook, author Lynda Bailey, and I'm also on Instagram and on TikTok. My website is www.lindabailey, that's Linda with a Y, .com, author lindabailey.com. And my newest is Heartache and Hopeful. You get 4 stories, 4 novellas in one book. So it's a steal.
Excellent, excellent. The one thing, what the one outcome from this, and Cece had mentioned this in another place, is that as we go through meeting writers like yourselves, our to be read file, our to be read stack is just starting to grow and grow and grow, and I think we're probably going to throw that guy on the Barbie. Thank you for joining us, Lynda. We really appreciate this.
Well, I so appreciate the invitation. It was great chatting with you both.
Thanks for being here.
So I want to again, Lynda Bailey, whose website is authorlindabailey.com, Linda with a Y. And you can see this podcast and other podcasts like it out at our website at twomorebooks.com. Again, this is a partnership between the Sierra Arts Foundation and Two More Books LLC in an effort to raise the visibility and marketability of our local writers. Please check out Lynda and other writers that are on this podcast. They're incredibly fascinating, and to hear the technical aspects, the background, and the logical progression to develop the work of art that we are doing is incredibly fascinating. Thank you, Lynda.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.